poets. So many of them are good poets.
Okay, some of these songs, though, when you make, if you feel a song that you've made, I know if you all made songs, if you feel them songs, then you don't care what anybody else, you want other people to like them, but if they don't, you feel happy anyway.
That's the way I am with my stories.
Well, that's the way I am.
I don't care if anybody reads them at all. I write them for me.
That's right.
And
And
if
you
they
know,
like them, well, that's just extra bonus.
and it don't hurt me if somebody, I had one person to tell me right to my face, she said, you know, said, I just sure don't like to hear you sing. And I said, well, I don't care. I said, that's okay. And then, you know, I said, it sort of, I studied a bit, and then I said, well, why bore other people with stuff I've got, you know. And that's when I dreamt that about Velma, you know, my oldest daughter, dreamt that song about her, and then I dreamt one about I made one about my mother.
What is that, the Golden Rocket?
Yeah, the Golden Rocket.
That's a beautiful song. Would you share that with Verna Mae and Charolette and all those?
Would you want me to
I'd
sing
like
it?
Yeah, I'd like to hear it.
You see. Last night I dreamed I died and went to heaven away up there. I dreamed I seen my mother rocking in a golden rocking chair. I seen mother, she was not alone. Jesus kept watch over her at her heavenly home. Now I know she's with Jesus way up there. I dreamed I seen my mother rocking in a golden rocking chair. Mother, she worked so hard here in this land to raise her children. She done the best she can. Now I know she's with Jesus way up there. I dreamed I seen my mother rocking in a golden rocking chair. Here in this world, mother, I know not what to do. I just turned to Jesus, and how sweet memories you away up there. I dreamed I seen my mother rocking in a golden rocking chair. I'm going to meet mother, I'm going away up there, for I feel Jesus so deep in my prayer. When I get to heaven, I won't be alone up there. I'm going to be with Jesus and mother, rocking in a golden rocking chair.
That is beautiful. It's beautiful. Her things are soft and sweet and lovely.
And knowing her mother, it means a lot more to me than it does to me. Because she was the
the
sweetest
boys,
mother.
Angie, would it be okay? Or I thought this is real sweet. Now, a lot of people in this world, you have your children, and you don't understand how sweet and how good they are until they leave you. And then when you're home is lonesome, you stop and think about your children, and they're always not a heartbeat away from you. So this is a song that I made up about my boys, all three of them. You are just a little angel sent from God above. Just a little baby boy for mommy and daddy to love. Though we will play with him and do the best we can, and ask God to keep him when he grows to be a man. Someday our baby, he will grow up and be grown, but the memories of his childhood days, they will live on and on. Though we will pray for him and do the best we can, and ask God to keep him when he grows to be a man.
Charlotte, do you have any dreams or vision stories that you can share with us about things? I know you had a wonderful story about a dream. Could you do it? You said it was a real long story, but you consolidate a dream about your finding the wedding ring.
Oh no, that wasn't a dream. I woke up out of a dream. That was the strangest thing that ever happened. You know, a lot of people talk about ghosts and they're just scared to death of ghosts. And well, I saw one, only I didn't figure out till much later until all the adults had to convince me this was what was happening. It was it was right at the end of October one year, and it was early cold. It was unusual to have cold enough to have hog killing. And of course, when you have hog killing, the whole house and yard is just working alive with people that they've come in. And I had so many relatives as a little kid that I didn't even try to keep them all straight. All I knew was that the hog killing was at the farm, and it was at my grandmother's house. And she was getting in kind of a swivet because she had to coordinate all the work, you know. They hung the hog up by its feet and slit its throat, and it gave that high-pitched squeal that a hog gives when its throat's slit. And then they lowered it down into the water and scalded it and started scraping that, and, you know, cut it open in the gut. And all the women were making sausages. And Mama had to feed all this crew at lunch in addition to rendering out the lard and making the sausages. And she was about as busy as she ever got. This was my grandmother. And she was short with me. She always was the most patient woman with me. But that day, she was short with me. I was 8, and that's just old enough to be underfoot and not big enough to be any help. And because I had been born just before World War II, I was 6 months old when Pearl Harbor was bombed, there weren't any other children in the family because all the men had been away from the war in my age group. And then there were a bunch of babies from after the war when the men got back, you know. And my grandmother said, "Go in the house and take a nap." And it broke my heart. I cried. My grandmother just never talked like that to me. She made me get in with those babies. And of course I was tireder and more worn out than I thought. And I lay down in the back bedroom, and there were several cribs and cots and things around with the children. And I climbed up on the big bed, and there were 2 babies in it with me. And there was light on 2 sides of the room were banks of windows, and on a third there was a long hallway. And I went to sleep, and I hadn't been asleep. It didn't seem like very long because I didn't want to wake up. And the bed was shaking, and this woman was, "Wake up, wake up." Now, one of the reasons that my grandmother had been so upset and short with me is because sometime in getting dinner for that crew or in making sausage, she had lost her gold wedding ring, the one that my grandfather gave her. And he had been long dead, and she was remarried, but she was just very upset about losing that ring. It had come off of her hand, and everybody said to her, "Now, Clara, you will never find it unless somebody gets hold of it in the sausage or it shows up in a cake of soap, you know, later." But she didn't expect ever to see it. Well, the bed was shaking, and this little woman woke me up, and she said, "Wake up. I want you to do something for me." And I said, you know, like a kid will do, and rubbed my face. And she says, "Now quit that, wake up, I want you to help me." And I said, "Yes." She said, "Are you awake?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she says, "Well, put your shoes on." So I climbed out of bed, and I still had on my jeans and shirt, put my shoes on, and she said, "Now I want you to go out there and tell Clara that her ring is under the pump. This down in the mud there." It didn't occur to me to ask how she knew or why she didn't pick it up herself if she knew, or why, you know, I was sleepy. And she made me put my shoes on, and she commented I had on loafers and they had on pennies in them. She didn't like the fact that I had on blue jeans, and she told me so. And she said, when she woke me up, she said something that my grandmother said every day of my life. She said, "Great big old girl like you are laying up in the bed sleeping like a mountain choke. I'd be ashamed of myself." So I climbed out, you know, and brushed my clothes off, and I started to go out the door, and she said, "Brush your hair." And so I went to the mirror and stood there and brushed the hair and turned around and let her look at me, and she said, "You'll do." And I didn't think there was anything unusual about that. And I went on down the hall and out into the kitchen and got an apple and sat on the back steps. And after a while, my grandmother's second husband came over to the pump and was pumping. And I said, "Daddy, Mama's ring is in the mud down there under the pump." And he looked at me like I had 2 heads. He said, "Chubby, I don't want to hear any more about that ring. We've looked everywhere on this place for that ring. Now don't get your grandmother upset again." So I sat there and ate my apple, and I was beginning to wake up some now, you know. And in a few minutes he came back, and I said, "Daddy, the little woman said that ring was down there." And he said, he just looked at me like I had 27 kinds of a fool, you know. And he dropped down to one knee and patted that mud And the strangest look came over his face, and he hit the pump and pulled up, and there on his finger was her gold ring. And everybody came over, you know, all the women that were working in that area, and said, "Law, Everett, how did you find that ring?" He said, "Well, Chubby told me." And they looked at me. You know, I looked behind to see maybe was it me they were looking at. And I said, "Oh, it wasn't me," said the little woman told me. And they said, "What little woman?" And I said, "The one that was taking a nap in there." And they said, "There are no grown-ups in the house." And I said, "Yeah, there is." And I ate my apple. So 2 of the aunts, busybodies, you know, trotted on in. And they came back and they said, "There's no woman in there." And you're 8 years old and everybody's picking on you. And I don't know how it was in your family, but they just get kids going about things. And I was sure that I was the butt of a joke, you know. And I said, "Well, now you can't miss her in this crowd. She's got a long braid down her back, and she's wearing a white nightgown. You're not going to miss her." And they said, "There's nobody in there." So I got up and went and looked, and there wasn't, just the children sleeping. And in a few minutes, my mother came in carrying a big pan of sausage meat. And they told her, they showed her the ring and what a miracle it was found, and the little woman told me where it was. And she said, "What did she look like, Charlotte?" And I said, "Mother, she's small. She's shorter than I am, shortest woman I ever saw, and she had on a white nightgown, and she was some of us, I know, because of the way she talked to me, and she had a big hump on her back." And the minute I said that, all the grown-ups quit chattering and just stared at me. And I began to worry when they stared at me like that. And Mother said, "Somebody go and get Mama." So they sent for my grandmother. And I'd already told this twice, and I didn't want to tell it again, but when my grandmother looked at me with her blue eyes and said, "Tell me," I told it one more time. And about the little woman in the white nightgown who I assumed had been sleeping with the rest of us taking a nap, and how she wasn't 5 feet tall, and she had long plaited hair and a great big hump on her back, and that she said, you know, how she talked to me, just like bossy, like I figured she was my great aunt or something. And my grandmother smiled and said, "That was my grandmother," and took a ring and put it on her finger. Now, the way they knew that is that she was trampled by an ox in a stall in the year 1846, and it broke nearly every bone in her back. And this was just being Indian country. The county was settled in 1840, and they didn't have good medical care. And 2 Indian women that had not gone west with the Cherokee removal, who were still there 8 years after the removal, came and swung her up in sheets from the rafters. And they kept her turned, and they stayed there 7 months. And in the whole time they were there, they never spoke a word, not to the little girl, not to anybody else in the house, not in their language or in ours, and not even to themselves did they talk. And one morning when she was better, they just turned and walked away. And that was my grandmother's grandmother, and she healed, but she would have been a small woman anyway. But because of the back being broken, she had a great big hump on her back. And there was no question. You know, all these grown-ups were standing around this 8-year-old kid saying, "That was a ghost you saw." And I looked at them and I said, "If that is a ghost, I'll never be scared in my life again," because that was the ordinariest, bossiest, orneriest little old ghost woman I ever saw. She sounded just like anybody the rest of my kin.
You know, I believe that. You see.
I think.
Time out, y'all.
I did.
There was a
We're all tired.
and Austins and Willers.
Okay.
Well, we're really not Sloanes. We're Hall. Willers Adkins. Austin's Adkins.
Yeah.
Austin's a hall.
No, he's Adkins. Him and Willers Adkins and we're Hall. We're all little granny out.
Okay, you want to tell that story? You got the camera roll. Story about you.
The first white woman that ever moved to Caney, where I live, was little Granny Alice. And before she was married to Harm Slone, she had 3 kids, each one by a different man. You call her a lady of the evening or whatever you want to. She wasn't married to her father. And we presume that she came to this area just at that time. There was a great stigma on kids that was born out of wedlock. And we think she came here just to raise them up without people knowing the way they were. And one was Adkins, and one was a Stevens, and one was a Hall. That's what we've always been told now. But all of my research, I can't find anything about the Stevens. But I believe he was real because my father was born in 1863, and his great-grandfather was still alive, one of Granny Alice's sons. So I'm sure he knew about it and told. But the Halls now, me and Florida come from the generation of the Halls, and our husbands come from the generation of the Adkins, so that makes us about 60th cousins to our husbands or something. And little Granny Alice lived to be 100 years old. Now she was 42 when she married the man Slone, and they had one child named Harm Slone. And we know where her body is buried, and it's just her body because she was found a bear. They think a bear had eaten her head off. They just found her behind a log and a lot of bear tracks. And I've done a lot of research on it, and they did have slaves. We know that the Hall was named Shadrick, and we still carry the name on down, but they've changed it to Shade now. And the Adkins was named Dyson, and of course we've still got thousands of Dysons around here, and that was my father's name. Willie's grandfather was named Dyson, and I had a brother-in-law named Dyson, and one of your uncles, Dyson. That name was over and over again because we carried the same name. But so far we don't know what happened to the Stevens, if he died before he got grown or if he left. We have no, it loses its taste.
Florida, could you just tell that joke about the boy and girl walking down the road? Are you rolling, Tony?
Well,
Just
you
say
know,
rolling.
to start off, you see, I'm not educated, and I'm afraid to use words, you know, I'm like the...
Well, that's what
You're
makes it
doing
so fun.
fine.
Yeah, you see this boy, you see, he stayed on the farm and worked, and his girlfriend, she went off to get her college degree, and so back in them days, they had to walk 4 or 5 miles to church, so they was walking to church, and when they started, why, he looked at her, he said, honey, you have the prettiest hide. And she said, looked at him and said, no, I said, don't say that, say skin. Well, you see, he had this old big, hoarse voice, you know, when they got to church. Well, the preacher got up there and opened church, so he started out singing, hide me, oh my Savior, hide me. And this boy, he started singing, skin me, oh my Savior, skin me.
Could you tell that story about the preacher who dropped his teeth down the well?
Remember that? Well, you know, the old regular Baptists are well noted for liking chicken. Because every time anybody comes around, preacher comes around, you fix some chicken. And this old preacher dropped his false teeth down in the well. And they was all pondering how on earth was they going to get those teeth out. And this one old man said, tie you a chicken bone on the end of a rope. So they tied the chicken bone on the end of that rope and dropped it down there, and here they come back out with them teeth clamped right on that chicken bone.
I've told that same thing as part of the beginning of the dry fry story.
It's a good start.
About how you fish with using a drumstick for bait with
That's
them.
a good one. I've stopped it when I heard her tell that. It'd be good. Do you have a short, funny story you could tell?
Oh, I can't think of one right off the top, I'm sure I do, but...
What about the woman? One of those...
Oh, well, not funny. Oh, Miss Hollis. Oh, Miss Hollis. Well, she was forevermore doing something strange. I guess the first time I ever figured out that I was some smarter than Miss Hollis, I was 6 years old. She was just one of these tired, faded-out little women that had come down out of the mountains for her husband to work at the talc mill. And right after World War II, you know, nobody had anything made out of metal. And my daddy brought my grandmother a thermos bottle. It was about this high, gunmetal blue down at the bottom, big stainless steel top. We've still got it. It was that tough. And when you get something in the mountains, it's not polite to take it and put it on in the house and put it away. You set it right out. Now everybody, this is the first time my dad had been in town since before the war, so everybody in the little village of Chatsworth had come out. And they passed that thermos bottle around and looked at it and admired it and talked about what it would do, you know. And after a while, you know, the visitation broke up and everybody went on back to their house. And we went in the house and had supper. And my dad, Eden Swanson, from his place at the table, looked out and he said, "Clara, there she is back again, Miss Hollis." So we hurried up with supper, and Granddad and I did the dishes, and Mama went out and sat down in her rocking chair on the porch, and she looked down at the foot of the steps and said, "Why, Estelle, there you are sitting down there in the dark at the foot of the, come up and have a chair." So Estelle came up and she got a rocking chair, and there were two rockers going, one on each side of the screen door, and the light from the central screen door spilling out and shining right on that thermos bottle, and Estelle is just a rocking and a studying and a eyeing that thermos bottle. And Mama wants to help her out so bad. Mama says, "You know, Estelle says, in the hot summertime, you and me can take all these young'uns on a picnic, and we can put lemonade in that thing in the morning, and when we get to the picnic spot at dinner time, it'll still be cold." And Estelle rocked and smiled, and she said, "Keeps it cold, And she was just studying it and thinking hard. And Mama decided, well, she's going to have to help her some more. And she said, "Estelle said, of the cold winter time, I can put Everett's soup in that thing, and at dinner time, it'll be just as hot as when he left the house of the morning." And Estelle said, "Keeps it hot." And she rocked on a few minutes longer, and she said, just couldn't stand it any longer. And she said, "Clara, how do it know which way to do?" Estelle was a wonder. She's forevermore getting in some kind of difficulty. When we got street signs, she was illiterate, and she just had this respect for the printed word. And I led her by the hand up and down all the little 1 mile on one side of US 411 and come the mile back up, you know. And she was memorizing those street signs until pretty soon she could take her grandbabies and take them on a walk, and she could read those street signs. And it was a magnificent thing in her life to be able to read those. And it was that love for the printed word, and she had such a respect for it, that brought her to what I like to think of as Estelle's finest moment.